a very good afternoon. I think people are just joining us. I think most people have now entered the room. So fantastic. So I'm just going to start off. My name's Henri Murison. I'm director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Just counting to make sure we're all here. 2 seconds. Super. So really appreciate you all joining us, and the traditional sort of Zoom arrival, which I know is always exciting and thrilling to everyone. And it's a particular appreciated for you to give up your time today to join us to discuss Electricity North West, Power at the North West, our future plan and their future plan, of course. We are obviously discussing what that means for not just the green recovery to come, but what the next stage of that will be in their business planning period to follow that, and particularly leading the way to net zero. Many of you here will have had the opportunity to engage so far with Electricity North West's ambitions, and to see the outline plan and ambitions. I'm sure you will be able to note some of the feedback and some of the thoughts you've given and shared before. I'm particularly glad that Electricity North West are going to be presenting their plan today. And we've got three important guests who have been involved so far as stakeholders to that process, who are going to give their reflections. They come from across the distribution area, so they have a different insights and different places they can reflect on as well. So we have Todd Holden, who's chair of ENWL's Sustainability Advisory Panel, but also an energy consultant. We have Jenny Willis, who's a Cumbria-based energy consultant and chairs Energy North West's Customer Vulnerability Advisory Panel. And then we have Miranda Barker, the Chief Exec of the East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce, a great friend to the Northern Powerhouse, but particularly here today because of her insights and understanding not just of the environmental space, but most particularly around the views and thoughts of the business community, not just in Lancashire, but more widely. The way today will work, we're going to have a presentation from our colleagues at ENW in just a second. In terms of housekeeping, there will be the opportunity for some live polling questions throughout, and do get involved and let us know your thoughts. There is an opportunity to use the chat function, which I think some people may have already just clocked onto, and it is there and available to use. And then we also have the ability for you to talk and share your thoughts on Twitter. So the ELEC North NW _news and at the @DevoConnect hashtags, which you can see on the screen in front of you, to be able to continue the conversation online. And I particularly want to kind of highlight that today is a chance for you to get involved. So please do raise your hand during the sessions. I will try and come to you to bring you in when we have the opportunity for questions. So without further ado, next, I just want to invite Paul Burcham, who's going to give us an overview of the future business plans and set out the context for today's feedback session. So, Paul, really appreciate you being here, and a pleasure to be able to chair the conversation with you guys, giving your insights and some of the answers you've given in your plan to some of the questions and challenges I'm sure that stakeholders have posed to you through the engagement process.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, it's great you can join us for this session as well, and we appreciate all the support you've given us through some of our stakeholder engagement that's led up to this process. And thanks to all the audience for taking time to hear an introduction to the business plan and to give us some more feedback and opinions. And we hope it will promote interest for people to visit the plan and look at the more extensive questions we're asking there and engage further. We've done a massive amount of consultation so far. This plan is the result of our largest ever public consultation, and it's been a greater than 2 year program where we've had more than 18,000 conversations with people who live and work in the region and are affected by the decisions that this plan will ultimately make. So you can see here, thousands of engagements and loads of different ways that we've been working through this with our customers and stakeholders to understand what the region requires and put together a plan that meets that. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So really, you know, we've had to make some big decisions on what to include. We've looked to make this a very ambitious plan, because that is what we've heard from customers and stakeholders that they want us to do. And we've had to make some tough decisions, and there's some big trade-offs to look at in this. Customers and stakeholders have asked us to do more, to lead the way on the transition to net zero, to reduce power cuts further, to improve the resilience and reliability of the network, and to look after the most vulnerable in society, to support those in vulnerable circumstances, and to support those in fuel poverty. So customers have come to us and said, when we understand everything that you do, we really like it, and we think you can do more. And a lot of them have said, well, we're willing to pay more for that as well. 80% of customers have said they'd be willing to pay just under £10 more per year on their bill to Electricity North West. But that does we do need to recognise that that means there's 20% of customers who have said they can't afford that. So we have some really challenging things to think about in that, and we need to recognise that we're producing a plan in some extreme circumstances. So not only do we have the ongoing climate emergency, which is driving us to look hard at how we can support the transition to net zero, but we've then subsequently had a global pandemic, and that has created very difficult circumstances for our customers right across the region, and that requires us to think sensitively about that. So what are we proposing in this plan? Well, I think we're meeting the challenge of ambition. We're looking to invest nearly £2 billion, and that's an enormous increase on the expenditure that we're making at the moment in the business. And we're investing to support all of the requirements of our region in delivering a net zero future for everyone. We will commit to putting in place all the capacity that the region requires as it transitions towards net zero, and we see a big growth in electricity usage as we decarbonise away from fossil fuels for our heating and for our transport. And we're also looking to improve the resilience and reliability of the network, and committing to a further 20% reduction in the number of power cuts and the average time people are without power. We made that commitment at the start of the last price review, and we're really pleased that we were able to hit that challenging target. But technology doesn't sit still, and through some of the innovation we've done, we believe we now have the capability to drive this even further. So we'd like to achieve a reduction in power cuts for people from once every 4 years to once every 5 years, and to drop the average time off supply for up to about 20 minutes a year for the average customer. And then we're looking to support those that need extra help. We're putting in place additional support for customers in vulnerable circumstances, and to address those who find themselves in fuel poverty. And in doing that, we want to remove barriers that ensure that nobody's left behind in this transition to a net zero future. And we think we can do all of this for just a £2.14 increase in the average domestic customer's annual bill. So that's because we're making big efficiencies in a number of areas, because we're reducing costs in other areas, we're reducing our financing costs, and we're thinking quite smartly about how we put the whole thing together. So just a little taster of what's included in the business plan to whet everybody's appetite. And our timetable as we go forward is to consult until the 3rd of May. We are very welcome to submissions on this business plan after the 3rd of May, but what I can't guarantee after that point is that they make it into our July submission. So 1st of July, we'll submit a draft plan to Ofgem. We'll get feedback through the summer on that. And then on 1st of December, we will finalise our business plan, and that's the final submission. So if we do get feedback on this plan and it doesn't make it in for 1st of July, it could still be included in what we consider for the 1st of December. So that's our timetable, and we're really keen to hear from customers and stakeholders about what they think of this plan. Have we listened to you properly? Have we reflected your views in the plan that we've put back there? And if there's anything more that you think we should do, or there's anything less that you think we should do, is there anything different you think we should do? Let us know, because your feedback's really important to us. Henri, back to you.
Great, thank you. So next we're going to bring in our panel. And so first I'd like to ask Tony Holden, who I just quickly introduced earlier, who is independent chair of Electricity North West's Sustainability Advisory Panel, just to give some reflections on decarbonisation, on balancing environmental priorities, but also on what his opinion is on the plans from his own perspective. So if you'd like to come in next, Todd, and then I'll be coming to Jenny and Miranda after you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending whether or not you've eaten. I think having read the plan and heard the presentation, I think one of the things that I'm really struck by is the need within the plan to identify long-term decisions and long-term investments which are needed to keep the lights on and to meet the net zero transition. Yet at the same time, we're in such a dynamic place within society with the global pandemic, and also the accelerated progress on climate change. So what would have been seen as good practice 12 months ago is so behind the curve now that it's hard to believe, and trying to predict that 6-7 years into the future is going to be really challenging. And I suppose that's where my question comes from, really. We've identified that climate change is the biggest threat to society, and therefore governments, stakeholders and residents see it as a priority. DNOs are critical in enabling that transition. So within the plan, what specific support have you done to enable that transition? And what gives you the confidence to say that what you're doing is enough?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, Todd. So what we've done within the plan is to forecast for the region what we think is going to happen and how that will drive changes in electricity demand over time. And we do that at a very granular level. So we take the macroeconomic changes, large-scale forecasts for electric vehicle rollout, for transition to electric heating, and then we reflect those on a case-by-case basis as we look across individual communities and the network that serves them. So we build our models up from the bottom up, reflecting national trends. And that allows us to look at how constrained the network is in each individual area, how that those demands for electricity might grow, and what that requires in terms of either new network or new flexibility from network users. So that enables us to put in place a plan that ensures that the capacity is provided in the right place at the right time as electricity demands increase. We're also investing to remove constraints that might inhibit renewable generation from connecting, because whilst we have a lot of generation connected to a network, we know that there's a lot more to come. And we're also putting in place a specific fund to support community energy schemes as well, because they're an important part of the whole dimension. And then the final thing I think I would say here is that what we do need to do is to work closely with our regulator Ofgem to put in place flexibility within the price control regime that allows us to change that plan quickly if we find we've got it wrong. And you know what forecasts are like. The only thing that's correct about the forecast is that it won't be correct. So we know we've done our very, very best to create an accurate forecast. We've got high confidence in our plan, but we need to have in place flexibility that allows us to respond to change and to go faster if that's what's required. And that's what we're planning to do. So we've looked at different scenarios. We know how if things move faster, we would need to scale, and we'll put in place the mechanisms that allow us to do that if that occurs.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Great, thank you. Jenny, can I get you to give your response now? Obviously, you're also, in your case, independent chair of Electricity North West Customer Vulnerability Advisory Panel. Just your reflections, but also, of course, a question as well. So, Jenny, I'll come to you now.
All right. Thank you, Henry, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say I really recognise all the stakeholder input that's gone into the plan this far, and it's really nice to see it all pulled together at this stage, but still in draft form, so that everybody on this call and other people more widely have got a chance to comment on that plan in the round. So yeah, thank you for that. On the customer side of things, I think I was particularly pleased to see the focus you've put on cross-utility working, because I think from a consumer perspective that really makes sense, and I know it's something that stakeholders really been urging all the utilities to do. So that cross-utility working I think is really is great. And also the increased support you've got in there for partnership working. I certainly know from chairing the panel, you've got a really committed group of partners that you're working with across the region, and I think the increased support that you've got in there will enable that to continue, and also have possibilities in there for new and developing partnerships as well. So I think that's also really welcome. I've got a couple of questions. One thing is about the various aspects of support you've got for people in vulnerable circumstances in the strategy. There's an element looking at supporting people in a power cut situation. You've got an element there which is around people in fuel poverty, and you've also got this element which links a lot with the whole net zero agenda, and how do you support people who may be left behind, so to speak, in the energy transition. So in terms of those three sort of elements, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how you're balancing that. Where, if you've got an emphasis, how's that working?
Okay, yeah, that's been a big consideration in putting the plan together, Jenny. I think the first thing to say is that we recognise that these are not discrete groups, that there are massive overlaps between people who might find themselves in more vulnerable circumstances, or people who might be struggling to pay their energy bills, or people who are not sure about what the whole transition to net zero means to them. So we need to provide a range of support and enable that to be available to everybody who needs it at different times. So we have got within the plan improved network reliability and investment in parts of the network where there's a high incidence of customers in vulnerable circumstances, and that will mean that those circumstances which can be made worse during a power cut will hopefully we reduce the risk of that ever happening. We already support over 1 million people who are in vulnerable circumstances who've joined our priority services register, and what the plan enables us to do is to promote that register further and grow that membership so that we can provide that support to more people. And I completely agree with you when you recognise the network of partners that we have in place to provide a lot of that support. They're a brilliant support to us. They provide great service to a wide range of people, and really practical and significant help to people. And we want to encourage that partnership and grow it further. Through better appointment systems, through bigger welfare team, through enhancing that network of partner organisations, and through working more closely with panels of customers, we will give all customers on the register a better service and more support, and we'll grow that register by over 50% of the customers who are eligible to be on the register are already there. We want to get that to at least 60%. And then continue to grow it further. Working alongside local agencies as well, we can provide more integrated range of support services to help those who actually find themselves in fuel poverty. We estimate there's about 250,000 people in fuel poverty across the Northwest region that we serve, and this plan has the ambition of providing a service that can reach out and support all of those customers in the 5 years that we have to 2028. And we are concerned by those who are at risk of being left behind by the transition to net zero. So we're working with organisations that can help address this by building capacity within communities to understand what the changes are, what it means for them, and to get customers into a position where they can take those opportunities and understand them and engage with the whole transition. And one of the things we're doing is setting up an innovation fund that helps different organisations think differently about what they do and the support that's given, so that new thinking can be brought into this. And we'll carry on thinking about how we provide services, how we change what we do, and making sure that we have multiple ways of contacting customers so that nobody feels left behind. We don't let anybody suffer from digital exclusion, and we keep a broad range of different routes to access the services in place.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I've got another question, which I guess, you've outlined a whole range of potential inputs there. And I suppose I'm struck by the fact that, as you outline in the business plan in the introduction, you've got 80% of people willing to pay £9.80 more. And yet you're saying that you're going to wrap it up as a package, which will be £2.14 more. And I'm just wondering whether there's a missed opportunity there. Should you not be, why are you not considering charging the amount that apparently 80% of people are willing to pay, and therefore being able to sort of increase your ambition, whether it's in net zero or in supporting vulnerable customers, including probably a good proportion of the 20% who don't feel able or willing to pay that £9.80. So I think people might be interested to hear your thinking there.
Yeah, I as we said right at the start, these trade-offs are really difficult questions to wrestle with, and we're still really keen to hear people's views on that and to reflect upon them. We must remember that the service that we provide is universal, and our customers can't choose who their network provider is. Our charges are not means tested, so everyone has to pay the same regardless of their circumstances, and we try to bear that in mind all the time. So we recognise that 20% of customers have told us that £9.80 bill increase is not acceptable to them, and that's about nearly 500,000 households in our region. And it's also many businesses who've been hit really hard by the COVID pandemic, and we need to reflect on the impact on them as well, and what that then means to wider society. I would say that the majority of customers, through all the engagement we've done, have told us that our bill, which is around £90 a year, is excellent value for all of the services that we provide. And so we've worked hard to ensure that the bill stays at around that same level. There is an increase, but we've tried to contain that wherever possible. We've done that by reducing our financing costs, by making efficiencies and other cost savings right across the board for the whole business. And that's helped us offset what would be a big bill increase because of the ambition that's in this plan and the big increases in investment. We haven't really moderated our ambition on investment, and we're pushing forward to do everything that we can there. So we're not really finding that bill increase is a break on our ambition. It's more that we've let our ambition loose, and then we've tried to find other ways to offset the bill increase. And then when we think about those who are struggling to pay and what we can do to help them, as I've already outlined, we've got a plan of providing support for all those customers using our partner network. And we hope to reach all the customers who are in full poverty in the region over the 5 years. But also in the plan, finally, I would say, we are rolling out our Smart Street initiative. And Smart Street can help save £60 off the average bill for another wave of customers. And that will help people in the areas where we can roll that technology out and where it's suitable. And we are targeting that deployment into areas where we know there's a higher concentration of customers who struggle to pay their bills, And our ambition, if customers support us through this, is to again target that to about 250,000 people across the Northwest. So that will make a really big difference for some of those who do really struggle to pay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. And last off, before we go into the general discussion, so do start putting your questions into the chat, because we will be coming to people very soon around the virtual room. But Miranda Barker from the East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce, could you go next and ask, sort of give your reflections, but also your question?
Thank you, Henry. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and it's great to be here and to explore further the proactive relationship we've got with Electricity Northwest. It really is a very positive relationship, and this plan has been constructed very much in partnership with all of the local community, and we want to make sure that that continues to the nth degree, so we get what we need to ensure a prosperous but net zero positive local area. It's really good to be here. So thank you for your review of the plan. The issues that the businesses will bring are some of those ones you've already touched on that I just want to draw out. We're looking at probably the greatest moment of transition on our electricity network that we've ever seen. And there are so many areas where the solution seems to be electricity, whether that's vehicles, whether that's changing heating. All of those put an extra demand on your supply. And yet we know already that there are areas where businesses have been trying to expand over the last few years and finding it difficult to get the capacity they need locally. But also businesses are facing a real decision now. They're looking at the stick behind them of increasing electricity prices and how do they cope with that, but trying to decide when is the right moment to move into on-site renewable generation, adoption of new technologies, moving to electric vehicles. So they need a lot of support to understand when and how to go on that journey. So I have three quick questions around those elements, if that's okay. The first being around that capacity for supply. We've got businesses locally who are doing very well. Our manufacturers are doing excellently in Lancashire, and they want to expand their operations and move on to new business parks. And we have issues with capacity. How are you going to make sure that we don't have those issues holding back our economic growth?
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great question. Thanks, Miranda. So one thing that we are really committed to in this plan is providing the capacity that businesses need, and making sure that all of the capacity that's required is in the right place at the right time as electricity demands increase. And we'll do that either by contracting for capacity with flexibility providers through competitive markets, or by building more network where that's the only option. And that's why the investment in this area of our plan is growing by 250%. So there's a massive increase in investment in the provision of capacity. Further to that, what I would also say is where businesses find that they are hitting on capacity constraints, generally that is saying that the capacity that they want to access is expensive, and that's how that manifests. So we are also working with Ofgem to potentially change the rules on who has to pay what when they come to connect onto the network. So there's not much about that in our plan at the moment because Ofgem are still consulting upon it, but we expect this summer, so that we can reflect it into our final plan in December, that there will be a change in the charging rules, and that less of the capacity costs will be met by business and more will be shared through our bills across that. So there are changes both in who gets charged for what, but there's also an enormous investment from us in making sure the capacity is there.
That's great. Thank you very much. Of course, business has a responsibility too. There's no point in just sitting there and complaining about increasing prices and putting more stress on your network, when actually there's a role they could play in terms of being proactive and trying to reduce their energy use and understand how they can best cope with their energy use. Are there ways in which you're helping businesses understand what they could do and where to go for support?
Yeah, so One thing that's gone live very recently on our website, and we'll continue to grow and develop that, is our Go Net Zero Hub. So there's a massive amount of information and advice for businesses about how they can take the first steps on their own journey to a net zero future. And we've got within that advice from leading climate change experts that's targeted in a very accessible way and dedicated to different sectors of business community. So lots of specific advice that I think businesses will find very accessible and very helpful. And our commitment is to continue to engage with businesses, to learn about their needs, what advice really works well for them, and grow and expand that provision over the period of this business plan. So some really practical things that they can utilize there. In addition, we're the only DNO that operates a priority services register for businesses as well as for vulnerable customers. And we're committing to promote and grow the membership of this service as well, which will provide extra information to businesses, notice of our shutdowns where we have to make them on the network, better two-way engagement and discussion between us and the businesses. So improved channels of communication that hopefully help them to operate their businesses more effectively and reduce any impact that we might have on their businesses through our work.
No, that's good to hear. And of course, the next step after that is if we're working with our businesses to reduce their electricity needs, then the next step they might take is to start to think about on-site generation themselves to help them buffer those peak elements of their capacity need, but also they hope feed electricity back into the grid and receive some payment for that. But that's a huge transformation for you to have to cope with, is suddenly all of those people wanting a two-way grid that sends electricity out and receives it back. How are you gearing yourselves to cope with that sort of demand?
I think you're spot on in saying that's the way things are moving into the future. And that's a really exciting technical challenge for our brilliant engineers. We have fabulous award-winning reputation for innovation in the Northwest and within Electricity Northwest. And we're trying to focus all of this capability on these new challenges that decarbonisation, renewable generation, and the growth in electricity use bring to our network. So we're developing and deploying world-leading software in our control room now that allows us to operate our network differently into the future. And we'll continue to roll out smart devices, automation, remote control across the network. And that extends its capabilities to operate a lot more flexibly. And coupling that together with smart software that has within it, the latest algorithms and AI, then that capability enables us to use our existing asset base in a different way, in a smarter way. We'll get more out of it in terms of capacity, but we'll also have more flexibility that enables us to cope with those changing demands.
Thanks so much. And I mean, you may have guessed that we're getting to the point of being able to bring in some more questions. So I would ask if people can turn their cameras on. We'll bring in some questions from the chat, but please do use the hands up function if you would like to ask a question, so we can bring you in. I'm just looking through the chat to see what question we might have already, but we're just sort of seeing a few coming in, hopefully, I'm sure, almost immediately. But if people can turn their cameras on, I will be able to bring you in as well for questions. I think sort of summarising the conversation so far, I think obviously we've kind of got, I think, a lot more from this in terms of detail than you would normally be able to at this stage in the process. And I think it's really helpful to be able to see the draft plan. And I know that was a point made by, sort of alluded to by a couple of our our panelists in their questions. And I think certainly maybe be useful in terms of any of the questions people have got. If any of you have had a chance to look at any of the plan, please do feel free to bring that into your questions. So I don't think we've had anyone put their hand up just yet, unless I've missed anybody. Is there anyone who hasn't already?
There's some things in the chat, Henry. I'm just wondering whether I can see one there about from someone about how do you propose to identify and support those in fuel poverty? Are you working with local councils to identify how many residents are at risk of fuel poverty?
Yes,
I don't know.
I was going to let that person come in, but as we haven't had a hand up, if
oh,
you
sure,
want to come to that, Paul, no, it's fine. I was just going to try and get to people to let them ask themselves. I'm conscious they might want to, but obviously, if you are that person as well, do feel free to put your hand up, and I'll bring you in response to Paul as well. But thank you, Jenny.
If I just pick up a response to that question as we go, and while other people think about what they want to say. So yeah, what we have done is we pull together data from a wide variety of different sources, and we've constructed a social data mapping that covers all of our network down to quite a detailed sort of 6-figure postcode level, and that enables us to understand many different indices of deprivation or vulnerability, and layer those together, and that allows us to work out what are the areas in our network where customers are going to need the most support, either because of their vulnerabilities, or because of the circumstances that they're in, or because of their ability to pay their bills. So we have a very rich data set that we've built up over a number of years. That's turned into a very effective tool, and we share that tool with our partners. And also we are now getting into the situation, as Jenny was highlighting before, of sharing that information with the other utilities to build a consolidated database of the region, which does help guide us in knowing where to target what we're offering.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, one of the dynamics obviously we wanted to pick up today was some of the differential kind of targets we have for net zero, and obviously you've acknowledged those in the plan. Obviously there's a reflection, I know, from Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, the current Metro mayors in Liverpool City region and in Greater Manchester, acknowledging that. In terms of the specifics around what that means, obviously there are different priorities in terms of pace of decarbonisation, which obviously will mean different demands on the electricity network, Paul. But then obviously in some of the other places that perhaps haven't set such kind of near-term targets around net zero, there are other challenges around, for instance, around rurality and service quality, and improving the ability of people to get kind of the service they need in terms of more reliability. And some of those customers you could probably define to be poorly served. What do you think are the trade-offs in terms of the investment priorities, and by going, how do you see that working in practice, just before we bring in other questions in terms of those realities of aligning to some of those local plans, and how does that relate to energy action planning at the level of whether it be combined authorities or local authorities in terms of the support that ENWL might provide?
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's a really good question, Henry. What we do is build up a view of all of the pressures and the drivers of change in every part of the network, and they will be different, and they'll come from different areas. And then over the top of that, you reflect, how is the network currently loaded, how is it used, what's the customer base that it's serving, and that enables us to, as I was saying earlier, do a very bottom-up build of our forecast that reflects the situation that all of our customers are in, and the network that they're utilising now, so that we can understand where the pressure points come first of all, and respond to those at the right time. The biggest driver for us in the period that we're planning here till 2028 is the uptake in electric vehicles. So we have looked at vehicle usage, across the region, likely behaviours that we've observed where electric vehicles have been adopted from those drivers, how they're being charged, where they're being charged, and that you then reflect into the forecasts. So not only do we say, okay, if somebody has an electric vehicle in this location, will they charge off street or on street? Will they charge at home? What we're seeing is a lot of destination charging. So that means that in big concentrations, say areas around some of our cities, where you'll see a large number of vehicles traveling into those cities, then actually the network's going to need reinforcing in those areas, because when everybody arrives at their destination and starts to charge, that's where the big demands for electricity are going to be in the future. But it's very much built up by understanding what exactly is going on in every part of our region, what's happening on the network that serves that part of the region, and how that's going to change in the future. So definitely ambitions from local authorities and county councils do have an impact, but so do national trends, and so do consumer behaviour trends. And we look at all of those factors in determining our forecasts for electricity usage, not only what type of usage and what that's for, but the time of day that will occur. And then we're building a network to ensure that when the peaks occur in usage, all the capacities are there to meet those peaks.
Great, thank you, Paul. We've had some great feedback. I know on the last question you asked, from the person who'd asked it as well from the chat, they've messaged to say that they appreciate the answer. So Hugh, do you want to ask the last of the questions? We'll do, and then we're going to go into the polling.
Thank you. Paul, thanks for the presentation thus far. There's clearly some reading to be done. So apologies if this is covered in detail in there. I'm always slightly concerned when parts of the energy system say there'll be lots more demand. And you go, yeah, well, possibly. And that's partly because I work at something called the Active Building Centre, and we are looking at the integration of some of the technologies. So the most obvious one is don't just plug an EV into your house and take a lot of demand, put a battery into your house, or put some solar on your house to charge your battery. And you can see that the profile of demand changes, not just in the sense it's reduced, but you can shift it about. And that obviously adds benefits to how the system functions, and can be, both a benefit to the home or the car owner as well as the network. How do you think that should or could play out in your plans? And perhaps we can have a side conversation about some of the numbers.
Yeah, that would be good. So as I was saying before, you're spot on with this. It's really, really important that we understand the need for electricity at different times of the day, and how that time of usage impacts the capacity that's required, because we're sizing the network against the peak demand. Currently, our peak is a winter tea time, but it could well be that with a much greater prevalence of PV onto the network, solar power, batteries that are harnessing that solar power and then releasing it back to households and to businesses at different times of day, and changes in electricity for heating and electricity for transport, that those peaks will move in time. And ideally for us, wherever possible, we will seek to flatten out the load curve, keep the peaks down, and that means that we can keep the network smaller. And that's very much one of our ambitions to do so, and why, again, through that engagement with the regulator, we're looking at saying how can we change the way in which electricity is charged for, so that we send out signals for people of when to use it and when not. And that needs the involvement of the electricity retailers as well as companies like ourselves. So there's a massive amount going on in developing these forecasts, in understanding what will happen to the peak demand, and understanding that. And we have tried very hard to factor those kind of developments in. I think probably one of the most important things for us to understand and to be flexible to as we take this plan forward and implement it is to recognise that big changes could occur in consumer behaviour driven by changes in the way national government create stimulus or incentives. So the for example, the banning of internal combustion engines by 2030 is factoring massively into our forecasts for how quickly electric vehicle take-up will happen, and that is a seismic shift. Government make announcements this week, and there's further discussion now about whether gas boilers will be banned from 2035 or 2025. How quickly will that occur? And that will have a big change. And so those big levers that government can pull are really important for us to understand. Those are what drive consumer behaviour change on a mass scale, and those are the kind of things that can really affect our forecasts. And therefore, those are the kind of things that we need to have that flexibility in the plan to respond to, which is, comes back to some of the points that Todd was making earlier.
Thanks so much. We're going to go to the poll now. So you can, if you go into the chat, then we will be able to see the poll there. Oh, sorry, I was going to say, before that, actually, Nicola, if you're still able to ask your question, do you want to come in? If you've got your, I think you've got your camera on. Do you want to say? Do you want to come back in, Nicola? Or you did have your camera on before. Maybe if you can't switch back on, Nicola, we'll go to the poll. So if people want to go into the chat now, here we go. So you can go to menti.com and use the code 9103 or 7293, or we will make sure that you can do it from the chat as well. There are a number of kind of questions we'd like you to answer, so and we'll go through them one by one if the technology allows. I'm just waiting for the oh, here we go. So if you go to menti.com and use that code, which is, I think it's now in the chat, so you can see it there as well, 9103 7293. We'll just go through the questions one by one. So the first of those questions that we'll get answers to, and then we'll go back into discussion and get Paul to give us some comments, is how much do you agree that the proposals we have run through today are the right ones for ENW's plan, for their plan? You do have to, just for the person in, you have to take the links there now. So if anyone is struggling in the chat, then please do just go to menti.com and put in the number rather than doing it any other way, if that makes sense. So the number to use. Oh, we are starting to get some answers. So as people are starting to respond, we will come to you, Paul, in a moment.
It's fascinating to watch it as it grows.
It happens, isn't it? Yeah. Well, as I say, don't get too positive just yet, because there's more.
No,
people
I know.
here.
That's what I'm worried about.
Don't call a win before you've seen it in full.
Absolutely. I have banned my team from playing.
So I think we're probably at a point now where we can start to see, we might have at least early numbers, Paul, as people keep voting, and we will be going on to the questions in a second.
Well, nobody hates it, so that's a good start.
And I think the key point to make, obviously, is that through the hub that you outlined earlier, there are the opportunities for people to give you their more detailed comments as well, because obviously the proposals themselves might be the right ones, but people might have some comments on the specifics of each one, right? Does that make sense? So
yeah.
I think we're next going to go to ask people, as is being displayed on the screen. I think we'll next move to ask sort of how much people agree that an extra £2.14 a year on the average bill would be value for money to deliver the plan. There was a question in the chat earlier asking about household growth. Of course, if there are more houses built, then that's presupposed, isn't it, into the electricity system. So it's not like if you build more homes, you can split the cost, because obviously there's then more people to service. So I did admire that question though earlier in the chat, that someone had clearly worked out a potential saving there for ENW, but sadly there isn't one. I think the question hasn't appeared just yet, I don't think. Oh, there it is. Wonderful. So we are starting to see some results when people can vote. I think before you respond, Paul, to the sentiment, obviously you mentioned the kind of the constraint and the amount and obviously the number of people and what they have had to say. Obviously, willingness to pay is only one part of the equation. To what extent did the other forms of engagement come to similar views on that? You obviously, is the 80-20 referring specifically to willingness to pay, or are you thinking what were the views in the wider engagement sessions?
Yeah, so the 80-20 is absolutely from a willingness to pay survey, and we wanted to make sure that in being guided as we started to develop the plan, we set a reasonably high bar. So we looked at that sort of 80th percentile number to give us a bit of a guide. What we've actually done in building the plan is first of all to triangulate that kind of sentiment from quite a large survey covering both domestic customers and businesses, with lots of other feedback, and you know our stakeholders are also telling us that they need us to do more, and that we should make sure that we are ambitious in all of the services that we're providing, but also that we need to look after the most vulnerable in society and those who struggle to pay the bills. So, you know, we can see that trade-off being recognised in the feedback from lots of different stakeholders who've participated in helping us with producing the business plan, helping us understand what are the services that are most valued, what we should build in, and then this whole debate about the degrees of ambition and how far we should go with that. In some areas, we are starting to hit upon the constraints on what the delivery constraint. So we're now getting to a stage where we've got so much in the plan that we're reaching a point at which that there's only so much you can do on a network in a 5-year period. And what we don't want to do is to be taking so much of the network out of service to enhance it, to put more equipment onto it, to provide new services with it, that's actually causing the performance of the network to deteriorate. So we do have other constraints to bear in mind, but overall, I think we are driven to do as much as possible, and we've tried to reflect that level of ambition in the plan.
Brilliant. And then we're going to get. I mean, clearly, you've not entirely lost the audience on that one, Paul. I think we can see from the figures. And then the last one around considering both the proposals and the costs. How strongly do you support the overall plan? If we could get votes on that, and then we'll go to closing remarks. just while those votes are coming in, I'm going to hand over to you, Paul, as well, just to wrap the session up as well, because clearly this is a good framing for ending, if that makes sense, because it looks like you're going to end on a positive rather than entirely bad news for you, which obviously would have been more unfortunate. But again,
no, it's a bit of a risk doing this kind of thing live.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think again, I as a partnership, obviously we're very interested in the net zero transition, and we think the role ENW and the wider utilities play in the energy system is critical as an enabler, right? But we can't also rely on you to make that transition on your own. And I think the balance in the plan between being an enabler for that decarbonisation journey without seeking to determine it, because obviously you're not a public body, you can't decide on what the net zero transition for the Northwest should look like. That balance is clearly a really important one that I certainly think you've struck really well and effectively, and certainly from my reading of the plan, I've really thought about that dynamic and how you best make that work. If you just want to quickly finish off, Paul, and it's been great to have you with us. We'll then let people, if they haven't, as we discussed earlier, let them go to their lunch if they haven't had it yet, or let them go on to their next meeting as we've taken an hour from their day. And I really appreciate, Paul, your candour and trying to engage as many of the stakeholders from across the region, those different regional voices, as we've been able to bring together today. So thanks again, Paul, from me.
Well, thank you, Henry. It's been a great session for us. I really appreciate your chairing, and I wanted to say thank you to our panel as well for their contributions, and for, thanks a lot for the really tough questions, guys. Put me through my paces, but hopefully that's enabled us to shine some light on what's in the plan, and that's been beneficial to everybody. And then I guess the final thank you for me is to everybody who's given up their time to listen to me waffle on today. Hopefully I've whetted your appetite to go and have a look at the plan. There are a number of questions that we are asking within that plan that we really still do need feedback upon. So we're very keen to get more evidence from stakeholders around the region about what they think, and there are still some important decisions to make. So you can help us make those decisions with your answers to those questions. So if you do want to explore this in more detail, you can get in touch with us. You can always get in touch with us via our website, via stakeholder engagement at enw.co.uk, by email, and we'll put those kind of links into the chat now. And there's loads more to see on our engagement hub where you can see the draft plan. So I would just say thank you for your engagement. I hope you do visit the plan and answer some of the questions there, and continue to give us your feedback. We'll continue to keep asking the questions and use that feedback to refine our plan. And by the end of the year to this year, we'll have a great plan that meets all the needs of our region and hopefully drives us all forward in a very positive way. So thank you to everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks to our panel as well, to Todd, to Jenny, to Miranda. We really appreciate it. So thank to everyone, and to Devo Connect, our organisers today. Thank you.